Mass at the High Altar. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
At first, Luke's volume 2, the book of Acts, presents an idyllic picture of the life of the early Christian church, everyone dwelling together in unity, sharing everything, all getting along beautifully. Then suddenly, a group described as the Greek Christians complain about the neglect of their widows in the church community. Humans being who we are, it seems that two groups of Jewish Christians in Jerusalem quickly found a point of disagreement and made the most of it. There seemed to have been a Palestinian group who spoke Aramaic, Jesus' first language, and a non-Palestinian group who spoke Greek, no doubt each finding a reason to feel better than the other. In response to the complaints of this latter Greek-speaking group, we hear that the apostles ordained 7 deacons to serve their widows. But the role of the deacons seems soon to have expanded into administration and well beyond, and suddenly, as we're celebrating today, we find Stephen preaching like one of the apostles, definitely not just serving at tables. Recent work on the order of deacons has exploded the myth that they were primarily social workers in a ministry of service. The role of deacons, both liturgically and elsewhere, was to ensure effective communication between bishop and people. This was before the priesthood emerged as the bishop's deputies in what we now call parishes. But back to Stephen. He was, Luke writes in Acts, a man filled with the Holy Spirit, who worked great wonders among the people. But some non-Christian Jews, members of the synagogue which was called the Synagogue of Roman Freedmen, that is, a synagogue set up by freed Jewish slaves, debated with Stephen, but proved no match for the wisdom and spirit with which he spoke. So they persuaded others to charge him with blasphemy. He was seized and carried before the Sanhedrin, the temple or religious court. And in his speech there, Stephen recalls God's guidance throughout Israel's history, as well as Israel's idolatry and disobedience, bringing him to the gift of the Messiah, which we celebrate at this season. His speech brought anger from the crowd, who threw him out of the city and stoned him to death. And as he was dying, echoing Jesus, he asked God to forgive his executioners. That's the story. And so, with the Christmas pudding still warm, we suddenly start hearing about martyrdom, death, and dissension. This is important, surely, for 2 reasons. First, it reminds us that Christmas is not a fantasy escape from the world. Rather, it happens and happened in the real world. Politics, violence, the threats of wars are still around, even while we celebrate the birth of the Prince of Peace. That is the world in which God becomes human for us, not some imagined perfect world. The important thing for us is not so much that the light shone in the darkness of Bethlehem, but that it shines now, whether we can see light in darkness and our world in its true light. That's what matters. From the earliest times of the Church's life, Christians discovered that following Jesus was not a romantic interlude in a hostile world or a magic escape from it. With Christmas Day behind us, looking on Stephen's death, we are forcibly reminded that we must focus on the light without the special effects of angels and shepherds and kings and candlelit carol services. This is real. This light shines on all the difficult things as well, or especially, including the things about ourselves which make us uncomfortable. Second, in Stephen's martyrdom, we have the same confrontation between good and evil, hatred and forgiveness, meekness and violence, which we find at the foot of the cross on Good Friday. We have a glimpse of the glorious new life promised to us in Stephen's transfigured appearance. In his encounter with the Sanhedrin, all who sat in the council looked intently at him, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel. And as we just heard in the first reading, he had the vision of the glorified Christ granted to him before he died. But filled with the Holy Spirit, he gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. So, today's commemoration of Stephen, the first martyr, insistently removes Christmas from pious fantasy land and brings it down to earth, to the space where you and I live every day. It reveals the demanding depth of Christmas deep beneath the tinsel. Stephen links Bethlehem to Calvary and reminds us that God's way of coming close to us to put us right with him involves struggle and sacrifice and works through the mystery of the cross. Stephen reminds us that where we experience or observe these things today, there is God with us.